Welcome to the Modern Husbands podcast, where any combination of Dr. Bruce Ross, Christian Sherrill, and Brian Page host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money in the home as a team. Today, we welcome Adrienne Hines, Ohio's renowned bankruptcy expert with nearly 3 decades of experience. Adrienne has redefined bankruptcy, transforming it from a daunting concept into a tool for financial wellness and dignity. She's more than a lawyer. She's an ally who combines sharp legal expertise with deep empathy, guiding those in financial distress towards stability. Adrienne uses TikTok to challenge bankruptcy myths and promote financial literacy. Her innovative approach earned her the 2023 Best Bankruptcy Advice Award at the FinTalk Awards by Debt.com. In today's episode, we'll talk about all things bankruptcy and marriage, ranging from how to prevent it, when it is appropriate, and many things in between. Enjoy the show.
Adrienne, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, let's just start with explaining how the most common bankruptcies for everyday people work. Let's start at like a 20,000 foot level.
Sure. So, consumer bankruptcies are for people who are individuals or small business owners. That's generally the type of people that that are my clients. Those people are going to be filing 2 very specific kinds of bankruptcies. The first and primary one, the most common one, and the one most people want to be in, is called a Chapter 7 liquidation. The second type of bankruptcy that most consumers in the United States would enter into if they weren't going into a Chapter 7 would be a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And just for clarification purposes, there is something called a Chapter 11, and that is large businesses and not really something that regular, ordinary people generally file. Think Sears and Roebuck and stuff like that. But a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13 are the 2 primary types of bankruptcies that people are going to file in the United States. And for the most part, people do want to file a Chapter 7, but it is income means tested. So people have to pass or qualify. Their household income has to be under a certain limit based on their state and their household size in order to file a Chapter 7. And for those people who don't qualify, they are the ones who are going to start looking at the possibility of a Chapter 13.
And so what are some other differences between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13?
Well, the differences are exceptionally large. I think the similarities, the only real similarities we have is that they are technically bankruptcies. The similarities are that they are overseen by federal bankruptcy judges. And in both bankruptcies, it is possible to discharge or get rid of completely some or all of your debt. In a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, people are going to be able to get rid of all of their general unsecured, non-priority debt if they qualify under the means test. Whereas Chapter 13 people, their income is a little bit too high to file a 7, or maybe a lot too high to file a 7, and so therefore they are channeled. They're put into a payment plan according to what they can afford. So the lower people who just barely don't qualify to file a Chapter 7 are going to be in a Chapter 13, probably paying less than what they owe their creditors over the life of 5 years. And at the end of that 5 years, the remaining debt that they had that they really could not afford to pay based on their income is discharged. So once you no longer qualify to file a Chapter 7 and get rid of all of your debt straight away, then we start to look at how much money you have coming into your house to determine how much you can afford to pay your creditors. And if you cannot afford to pay them all at the end of 5 years, which is the statutory bankruptcy period, then you don't have to pay them the rest. And that's the advantages of bankruptcy. You can see that the differences are quite expansive. One, you have to end up paying money back for 3 to 5 years, and the other you don't.
And both of them take 3 to 5 years. Right.
No,
Chapter
that's a
7
good question.
Okay.
No, one of the advantages of the Chapter 7 is that it takes about 4.5 months. And Chapter 7 is really a magic wand. Yeah, I mean, when I say it's the preferable form of bankruptcy, it really is. Most people are crestfallen and their hearts drop into their stomach when they learn that they do not qualify to file a 7. That's when we start talking about a 13. And there's actually a couple of reasons why you might not file a 7, even if you qualify. When I talked about a Chapter 7, if you notice, I said it's called a Chapter 7 liquidation. And so there's really 2 catches in a Chapter 7. There's 2 reasons why people may not be able to file it. One is their income is too high. But the second reason they may not be able to file a Chapter 7 is they may have something valuable, like their house or their car or something, in which they have equity that would otherwise be liquidated if they filed a 7. So, and that's really the complicated part of bankruptcy, is the complicated part of trying to give blanket advice to people, because the problem with this system is that every single state has different values for what you can keep. So in the state of Ohio, if you qualified to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and you had a home and that home was worth $200,000 and you and your spouse owned it outright, no mortgage, that means that house is you have $200,000 in equity. In the state of Ohio, you could file a Chapter 7 and keep your home. But in the state of Illinois, you could not.
Wow. That is a significant
that's the difference. In Ohio, the exemption for your household, for your homestead, is $161,000 each person. So technically in the state of Ohio, my husband and I could own a home worth over $320,000 with no mortgage and keep it. But the state of Illinois has a $15,000 exemption for your homestead each person. So the max that anybody in Illinois can protect is $30,000. So you can see that the analysis for bankruptcy begins to change very significantly when you have assets and depending on where you live. The people who are ideal for Chapter 7 are people who are below the means, who don't have a lot of stuff, quite frankly.
And you continue to go back to the word assets, and we've talked home, but we haven't brought up like retirement plans, like a 401k. So let's say that you file Chapter 7 bankruptcy, because that seems to be the one that most people go toward. That's the one that is it most common.
Right.
Okay. Yes. Do you lose your retirement?
That is a great question. And I think it is one of the most important reasons why I am on a mission to make sure people understand what bankruptcy is. The answer is no, you do not lose any ERISA qualified pension that you have accumulated up until the date of filing a bankruptcy. All ERISA qualified pensions, 401ks, 403bs, PERS, STRS, any of those are protected completely under federal law. And the reason that is important is because absolutely nobody should ever be liquidating a retirement plan of any consequence, small one or big one, to pay down credit cards, medical bills, or personal loans if they otherwise qualify for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And that's truly what my mission in life is, Brian, is to simply make sure that people hear the word bankruptcy, they are desensitized to it enough to get over that, that pit in your stomach that makes you feel like that's a really, really bad thing, because too many people wait until they've already liquidated their 401k and they haven't really solved the problem.
Wow.
And they cash out pensions to pay credit cards and they still end up in my office. And now we're filing bankruptcy, something they always wanted to avoid, in theory, and they squandered a portion of or all of their retirement. And as somebody who's just getting older every day, I recognize how incredibly dangerous that is. And it's the belief that bankruptcy is bad that is driving people to make decisions sometimes that is not in their financial best interest. So thank you for asking that. That's exactly why I'm out on a crusade.
I'm beside myself because it's not uncommon to read articles in the mainstream media about borrowing from your 401k as an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And to me, it sounds like a Chapter 7 bankruptcy allows you to have a financial reset at your current life without impacting your retired life. Is that
Well,
the case?
that's exactly the case. The entire purpose is to provide protections for your future. I mean, that is what bankruptcy is for. It is designed to completely clear the game board and start over. And people think that's a bad thing, but quite frankly, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a fresh start. And it happens fast. I think a lot of people shy away from or are disgusted by or are horrified by the word bankruptcy because they think that their credit is going to tank and they won't be able to do anything meaningful in a financial realm for another 10 years. And that's not true. Rebuilding credit after bankruptcy is common, relatively easy if you understand how to do it, and can be done fairly quickly. I had somebody just post 2 days ago on one of my social medias that they filed bankruptcy in November. They had their bankruptcy hearing in December. And this was just a couple of days ago in the beginning of January. And they said that their credit score had popped up 190 points. That's not uncommon. And people don't realize that looking at bankruptcy doesn't mean that you're hamstringing your future. Quite frankly, it means that you're opening it up. And I come from the philosophy of finance that says, listen, the longer you sit in misery with no plan, the less time you have to start to get into the financial game and build wealth. If you spend the next 10 years paying down all your debt and eating ramen noodles, two things are happening. Number one, you're not building wealth, starting businesses, and taking risks. And number two, you're spending 10 years of your life in a very difficult place. You're not enjoying life. I mean, we only have so much time on this earth, and we really do have to learn how to balance joy and kindness and love and family and all those things. And it's not easy to do those things when we are driven by overwhelming and crippling debt. We need a way, we need an escape hatch so we can start over and start rebuilding, because you need to be able to have the money to retire. Retirement is the older I get, the scarier it looks. And the more passionate I am about protecting what's going to happen to you in the future.
Well, I know you use your platform to educate folks about, financial health and bankruptcy. And you also get questions from folks who follow you. And then, of course, from your own clients, as you're a bankruptcy attorney. What are some of the common questions or concerns that you get, and how do you address those?
The two biggest questions that I get are, will I be able to blank after bankruptcy? And it's usually buy a car, buy a house, rent an apartment, all those things. Will I be able to blank? And the answer is, of course, they will be. That's the point of bankruptcy. But they don't usually see that. They don't understand the path. They can't envision a way that happens. So a lot of times it's simply kind of explaining the process so that they are comfortable with it and they can trust fall enough to believe the lawyer that's talking to them. And the second, of course, is, will I lose my blank? Will I lose my house? Will I lose my car? Will I lose my blank? Those are the two biggest questions. Will I be able to do something in the future, and will they take my blank? And the first answer is very easy. As a general rule, I know historically and statistically speaking that if these people put forth just a tiny bit of effort afterwards, they're going to start to rebuild their credit. I think the consumers these days are way more educated about credit than they were even 10 years ago from my perspective. So, of course, they're going to be able to start to just the fact that they're asking the question shows that they know why they're asking the question, and they're probably going to pay a little closer attention. And when it comes to the second question, will I keep my blank? That's a more specific question depending on the exemptions in their state and what equity they have in their stuff, right? And equity is what it's worth minus any secured loan, like a car loan is, secured by a car. A mortgage is secured by the house. Those are called secured loans. And if you have secured loans, whether or not you end up keeping those things through a bankruptcy are going to depend on whether or not it makes sense to you. But you use the secured loan, you subtract it from the value of the thing to get your equity. So if you have a house worth $100,000, you've got an $80,000 mortgage, you've got $20,000 in equity.
Can you take a step back
Yeah.
and explain to our listeners the difference between a secured loan and an unsecured loan? And then from there, explain, equity and the formula that you just provided.
I can absolutely do that. I sometimes forget that I plow through some of these words that I use every single day. I think that in my perspective, in my practice, I've really come up with basically 3 different types of debt to help explain to my clients and people what's going on. And I think of it as a pyramid. Imagine a pyramid cut into 3 sections. You've got a top triangle, you've got a middle, and you got the base. The top tip of the triangle is going to be priority debt. I call it priority debt. It's not what everybody else does. That's going to be taxes, child support, alimony, for the most part, student loans, because they are very difficult to get rid of in bankruptcy. So those are things we really aren't going to touch most of the time in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. All right. Those are priority debts. If you are in a Chapter 13, priority debts get paid first. Okay. Not student loans, but the rest of them do. So priority are taxes, child support, alimony, student loans for the most part, because that's what we know can't go into a bankruptcy. The second kind of debt is secured loans, and those are going to be right in the middle. Secured debt is a loan that is extended, that is secured by something, that is a title, right? A title to a car. I'm going off on a tangent. Let me pull back here.
No, that's a good example. Title of
I know
car.
you're so the secured loan section is going to be a house. It's going to be a car. It's going to be a boat. It's going to be, a John Deere tractor that you financed from Tractor Supply. These are what are called secured loans. And in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, that middle category, the first thing you need to do is determine whether or not you have equity in it. So you can owe money on it and still have equity, right? If your car's worth $20,000, but you only owe $8,000 on the loan, your equity is $12,000, okay? So the first thing we need to do is determine equity in all of that middle category, that secured stuff, and cross-reference it against your state's exemptions. Your homestead exemption for your house, your vehicle exemption for your car. If you pass the exemption test, then you get to decide whether or not you want to keep those through a Chapter 7. If you don't have too much equity, you get to decide, do I keep it or surrender it at no cost to me? People tend to keep them when they owe what they're worth or more, or they've got equity or they owe about what they're worth. People tend to surrender them when they owe more than they're worth, when they are upside down. So in that secured category, you get a choice after equity analysis. Do I want to keep it or not? And you can surrender things you can't afford or you don't want anymore. That's an advantage of a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Everything else, all the other debts you can usually think of, credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, that old Verizon that you had, back in your early 20s when you were footloose and fancy free and you didn't pay it and it's compounding and it's on your credit. Those are the types of things that go away in bankruptcy. And specifically a Chapter 7 bankruptcy wipes those out completely if you're able to file. That is the advantage. And you can see that in bankruptcy, there's a hierarchy of debt. The type of debt where we can get rid of straight away is the most dangerous, the unsecured. The creditors didn't get any type of security. It's high compounding interest, and it's high risk debt that company is engaging in. They take the risk The interest is high, and their business model recognizes and builds into the fact that there are defaults. And, that's why it's so important to understand what bankruptcy is. We're not going in there and, letting you walk away from taxes and child support. And we're not letting you get free cars and free houses. We are
Yeah.
allowing you, and by we, I mean the bankruptcy court, not me.
Yeah.
They are allowing you to reorganize your life, drill down to the important things right this moment, wipe out the stuff you can't handle, and allow you to restart. That's what it is.
And so what are some of the common reasons that you've run into that people file bankruptcy? And when I say common reasons, like what was the initial cause, right? Like, was it a job loss? Was it they got cancer and racked up a bunch of medical bills? Examples like that.
Medical debt is a very big one.
Okay.
Obviously, we live in a nation that does not have accessible, affordable health insurance for all. We just don't.
Right.
And as a consequence, we have a lot of people out there that have a lot of medical bills. So I would say that is a very big driving factor. And understand that somebody who has medical bills, who maybe doesn't have insurance, those people are usually going to have high credit card bills too, because a lot of those medical providers are forcing you to pay something in order to get the next level of treatment, or once you're through the emergency room, in order to see the orthopedic doctor, you've got to pay a deposit. And so those people tend to have medical bill or credit cards as well, or they've taken out a personal loan from their local bank or from the strip mall down the street. And so when we have medical bills, we almost always have credit cards too, because medical events are expensive. People have to stay in hotels, or they can't work because they're caring for somebody. So it is a vicious cycle, medical bills. The second is, of course, divorce. People who are going through a divorce, they had been together, they had made decisions together, they'd made financial decisions together at some, down along the way, and now they're in a place where they're creating two separate households, and nothing can be maintained. They cannot maintain any level of lifestyle that they had before, and now things can be very, very tight, and one person, they just cannot afford the things that they had purchased together because they now are separated and need new households. So that's number two. I file for a lot of older people who are widows and widowers, people who had not planned very well for their future, or who lost a spouse and didn't understand really what the loss of their income was going to mean to them. It's very frustrating and sad for me to file for elderly people. I think it's one of the reasons why I get very passionate about trying to protect your retirement, because I do see how fragile some of these people's living situations can be.
Sure.
And, of course, COVID, job loss, demotion, loss of overtime. Everybody's got an opinion. You shouldn't have bought that truck. You had overtime. You should have known that overtime was going to go. But if you work for 8 years with overtime, you start, don't have any other choice but to rely on it, because that's what you know. And so nobody in this world has the discipline to budget their lives the way that we technically should on paper, and therefore a little teeny thing can fall off a little screw can fall off the wheel, holding the wheel together, and it just all starts to fall apart, and that's usually what happens.
Hey there, podcast fam. We'd love to hear from you. Please take this moment to rate and subscribe to our podcast. Your feedback fuels our passion to bring you more engaging content. And please text this episode to your friends. It's your support that can help us grow. Now back to the show.
Is it possible for your spouse to file bankruptcy, but for you not to file bankruptcy, or even a broader question is, can your spouse file bankruptcy, but do so without including like the personal assets that you have accumulated in your marriage?
A spouse can file without their other spouse. Married people can file by themselves without their spouse, whether they are happily married and living in the same home or whether they are, separated, living separately. But if you are going to file bankruptcy without your spouse, a couple of things you need to know. First and foremost is that you have to pass the income test using your household. So I have a lot of people who will say, like, a stay-at-home mom wants to file because she maybe came to the marriage with some debt, but her spouse now makes, a lot of money and the household doesn't pass the means test. So one spouse can file without the other, but the household still has to pass the means test. That's number one. The second issue is that when somebody files for bankruptcy, everything that matters, everything that is evaluated by the bankruptcy court is that which is titled in that person's name. And so if husband and wife own a home together and one spouse wants to file bankruptcy, you just simply need to analyze the equity. And if it's two homeowners, husband and wife, then each person can claim half the equity. So if your house had $100,000 in equity and you're filing a loan, you have $50,000 in equity and your $50,000 in equity has to pass your state's exemption. That's how that works.
All right, we're gonna play a fast facts game.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you what I hope to be a straightforward question, but I realize that in the world of bankruptcy, there's always nuances that are difficult to explain with a yes or no kind of question and answer. But we're gonna give it a shot. All right. So are you ready for this?
I am. And let me say, if you ask me a question that is like, I know that it would need to be state specific, I'm going to use Ohio.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Okay, that's
I'm
good.
going to use Ohio. I'm going to use Ohio since that's where I'm at. That's what I know. So just so everyone understands.
And I'm glad you reminded me and reminded our listeners that a lot of this is state specific. That's important.
The exemptions are state specific. The means test numbers, the income limit numbers change a little bit too, but they tend to be much more similar in similar categories. But the exemptions are what vary wildly.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. First question: can bankruptcy stop a foreclosure?
Yes.
Can bankruptcy stop an eviction?
It can pause an eviction.
Can bankruptcy stop wage garnishment?
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the primary reasons why people run to my office in a desperate panic.
Okay. Now, in this next set of questions, the prompt is whether or not the following is possible in the bankruptcy process.
Okay, we're probably going to use Ohio just in case, preemptively speaking.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Can you file bankruptcy without losing your house?
Usually, yes.
Can you file bankruptcy with a student loan?
Yes. But whether or not your student loan is dischargeable remains to be seen, and it's a very difficult path to discharge student loans.
Can you file bankruptcy to stop a foreclosure?
Absolutely. Another reason why people run to my office very, very quickly in a panic.
Can you file bankruptcy to keep your car?
Yes, you can. I'm not a big fan of it, but yes.
Can you file bankruptcy to eliminate credit card debt?
Absolutely.
Can you file bankruptcy to eliminate student loans?
Generally, no, but there are very small lanes that are available there.
Can you file bankruptcy to eliminate medical debt?
Absolutely. It's one of the primary reasons why people need bankruptcy.
Can you file bankruptcy to eliminate private student loans?
Private student loans are treated very similar to federal student loans. They fall under the same rules and categories. And the answer is, it is very, very difficult, but there are some lanes available there under certain circumstances.
can you file bankruptcy to eliminate your car loan?
Not if you want to keep the car. You don't get a free car in bankruptcy. You can surrender your car and give it back and not be responsible on the loan anymore, but you'd have to find something else to drive.
Perfect. And what is one simple lesson you want listeners to walk away with from this episode?
I really want people to hear me say that bankruptcy is a legal, constitutionally protected way to address unmanageable, overwhelming, unsecured debt. And if you are looking at maybe cashing out some equity in your home before you go take that home equity line of credit out, before you take that 401k loan out, before you cash out a pension or STRS plan or something for the purpose of paying debt, I would strongly, strongly advise that you talk to a bankruptcy lawyer. Because, and here's the thing, Brian, people say a lot of the time, oh, I'm self-serving. I'm a lawyer. I'm a sleazy lawyer. I just want money from people. And the reality is that in the world of debt, there are only so many places you can go to for information. Yeah. And a lot of people go to their local bank and the local bank doesn't have an interest in helping you out of your problem. They have an interest in giving you a consolidation loan or a home equity line of credit so that you can pay them. So where else do you go to get information about debt, right? Are you going to go to a debt settlement company that you find on the internet or from an ad on television? Those people are usually scammers, and that's important to hear. So when I say go talk to a bankruptcy lawyer in your area, it's because lawyers are lawyers, right? We have ethical standards. We are licensed by the state Supreme Court in which we practice. And bankruptcy lawyers practice in federal court. And we have to be admitted into the bankruptcy court to practice. The judges can decide whether or not we should be able to practice there. They can say, you're not allowed to practice here, get the heck out. And they've done that before. And I think that's important because when you're trying to talk about your finances and get truthful information, I think a free consultation with somebody who's educated and who has to keep your information confidential and private is the absolute best option that you could ever get. And so it's free, it's private. Your spouse doesn't even have to know you talk to a lawyer, but the information that you receive could be exceptionally life-changing. That's what I think.
And so where can people go to follow you?
People can they can follow me on my TikTok, on my Instagram, on my Facebook, on my threads. I'm at The Ladylike Lawyer. You can go to my personal website, theladylikelawyer.com. You can follow through and come to my law firm in Sandusky, Ohio, if you're looking to schedule an appointment with me. Or you can just stick around and watch my videos. I've got over 800 videos on my TikTok account that talk about the bankruptcy process. And every question that anyone could ever imagine has probably been answered on there.
And for those of you who are fans of Tommy Boy, yes, Callahan Auto Parts Sandusky, Ohio is the home of Callahan Auto Parts. Oh, I love it.
There it is, right there, Sandusky, Ohio.
Thank you for joining us today and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks, Brian. It was really nice. It was nice talking to you today. Thank you for letting me get some of my message out, and I'm looking forward to our continued relationship moving forward. Very happy to have you in my circle.
A special thanks to our guest and, of course, to all of our listeners. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcast, give us a rating, and share the Modern Husbands podcast with others. Doing so goes a long way in growing our reach. And join your fellow Modern Husbands and have links to our podcasts, articles, and other resources to manage money in the home as a team sent to your inbox every 2 weeks by subscribing to our newsletter at modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.